I think one of the greatest tricks Google ever pulled was to convince the world that they are an opinion-free, honest broker. There is a lot of subtle opinions and influence underneath the hood.
To use the old Steve Jobs expression, AI turns out to be more of a bicycle for the mind rather than a tool that allows you to outsource your thinking. If you know what you are doing, AI will make you faster at doing that thing. If you don't know what you are doing, AI will make you faster at doing bad stuff.
I have finally found a vibe coding tool that actually works. They all get stuck on Superbase and they all get stuck on other bullshit. The only one that did it and did it fast was a company called...
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode.
Hi, I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
And I'm Chris Saad.
And in today's episode, YouTube's content juggernaut rolls on. Will they destroy TikTok and Spotify? The unexpected tech king of the 2020s, Oracle sitting pretty and leveraging their dominance in data centers to also take on the world of media. Sam Altman caught flat-footed in an interview about AI ethics. Is he really the person to be the master of the universe when he is not thinking about the ethical consequences of what he's building? Figma have finally announced their AI capabilities. They seem beautifully designed. What do they mean for the future of design and software engineering? And then finally, Nothing. The makers of Nothing Phone have raised $200 million to build the next generation of AI devices. Are they up to the task? Can they take on Samsung, Google, and Apple? We'll discuss that and much, much more right after the break. Today's episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by .tech domains. One thing about starting your startup that should be easy but isn't is naming it. Why is it so hard? Because all the good .com domain names are taken. So you end up doing something silly like misspelling it or adding random prefixes or suffixes. No more. Your domain shows your focus and intent, so you should make it sharp, clean, and unmistakably tech with a .tech domain. Head to get.tech/TSP or a registrar like GoDaddy to grab your .tech domain today. That's www.get.tech/TSP for the Startup Podcast. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to talk about today is the recent Made on YouTube event. So this is YouTube, their annual creator conference, right? In the same way that Google has I/O and so on, the developer conferences, this is YouTube's creator conference. And Chris, I was kind of amazed by all of the stats and all of the things they announced. And YouTube is one of those things that even if we talk about it a lot, even if we're impressed by it, we're not as impressed by it as we should be. It is an absolute juggernaut. So let's talk through some of the numbers and some of the things that are going on here. So YouTube have 2.5 billion monthly active users. That means that every month, 2.5 billion people use YouTube. When you consider that it is banned in China, that is coming close to half the world's population watching YouTube every single month, at least once. It's been a while also since YouTube overtook Netflix on television devices as being the most watched streaming service. Then talk about the creator economy here. YouTube have paid out $100 billion with a B, $100 billion paid out to creators over the last couple of years. It's funny, Chris, I used to work at YouTube between about 2009 and 2011. We used to keep track of every individual creator who was making more than $100,000 on the platform. I think we're up to about 12 of them. And everyone thought it was hilarious and unbelievable that someone could make $100,000 just from YouTube. So now, of course, we've got folks like Mr. Beast who are making tens, maybe hundreds of millions, and $100 billion paid out directly to creators from YouTube. This is a massively powerful social platform. And then let's talk about some of the things they announced, because it represents, I think, a leveling up of their level of ambition to match their power, which I think is interesting. So first of all, and to nobody's surprise, Chris, they talked quite a lot about AI and starting to leverage AI, because remember, YouTube is owned by Google, leveraging the power of that AI within their platform. So they have integrated a modified version of Google's VEO3 video generative model directly into YouTube. So you can use it to make shorts and to add custom B-roll and to put yourself into scenarios and so on. I think that is really interesting and starts to show how Shorts is going to compete with Instagram Reels and with TikTok, and is probably stronger in that competition than you might think at first, because it does have this huge distribution advantage of being part of Google. It has the advantage of having some of the world's most advanced AI capability, being part of Google. And I think those things are really going to start to come together. Now, the final point I wanted to make, Chris, and one of these is somewhat close to our heart. they spent quite a lot of time talking about podcasting and talking about music. And so now we're starting to see YouTube, as well as taking on Netflix, as well as taking on TikTok and Instagram Reels, they are taking on Spotify, they are taking on Apple Music, and they're doing it in a way that plays to their strengths. So they were sharing some big numbers about the number of podcasts listened to on YouTube. Of course, we're available on YouTube, the Startup Podcast, and also the YouTube Music service that's growing. But what they are leveraging is their ability to have direct engagement between creators and fans and allowing creators to monetize. This is something that Spotify has actually been really bad at, if I'm honest, right? Like, to the extent that we make money here at the Startup Podcast, we are finding our own sponsors. We are making our own money without any help from the hosting platform. But YouTube is going to have all of these tools for podcasters to get direct engagement from their audience and to monetize their audience directly. Interestingly, the same goes for music. For years, Chris, there has been this narrative that music creators have been thoroughly intermediated by their consumers and that the rise of services like Spotify has just made things worse for them. It's commodified them. It has reduced the amount of money they make per stream and made things really hard. So YouTube is now coming along and saying, hey, if you're a music creator, you don't have to go through a record label and then go through Spotify, and the only way you make money is that way. No, you can sell your merch directly to your fans. You can monetize your fans. They can pay you. They can donate money to you and all of that. And I see this coming together for YouTube as being the premier user-generated content platform across all of these different aspects. And I see evidence, Chris, of quite deep strategy being applied here, right? Where all of these things strengthen each other and take advantage of YouTube's existing strengths. And yeah, I was kind of blown away. What do you think?
Yeah, YouTube is the sleeper hit of the tech scene. People just sort of think of it as a toy, as a little throwaway thing, as a nothing little company or product or business. It is, as you said, the biggest thing on TV. People spend more of their time on YouTube, on their phones and on their TV than on anything else. It is the second biggest search engine in the world, second only to Google. And obviously they're both owned by Google. And I've put a limit on my screen time for the YouTube app because it was consuming my life. And so I'm notified every time I spend more than 2 hours on YouTube every day. Let me tell you, I spend 3 to 5 hours on YouTube every day. Even though it warns me, I tell it to ignore it for the rest of the day. And then I continue to spend another 1, 2, 3 hours on that bloody app. It has an incredible business model because it doesn't have to spend money on these prestige TV shows just to create just a small handful of content, trying to predict what's going to be a hit and what's not. They just let 1,000 flowers, 1,000,000 flowers bloom, millions of flowers bloom, and all of these creators are working their asses off, and YouTube just gets to, scrape the cream off the top. You mentioned $100 billion paid to creators, which of course is pay for performance. It's not paid up front. And it does not include sponsor revenue that these channels, craft for themselves, merch, secondary businesses. Mr. Beast is running chocolate factories off the back of his YouTube channel. These guys are making crap loads of money off the YouTube platform. And so this is really one of the most important tech companies around right now. And it is essentially a social network as well. People don't understand that. It's very much a very powerful media platform and social platform. You mentioned VO3. We've been talking on this show about AI slop. And what are these AI algorithms going to do to platforms like YouTube? The smart thing to do is to embrace the tools in a way that uses them as a scalpel instead of a dumping ground, right? So if they can control the way you use AI to fine-tune your content or to create clips of your content, clips that are, by the way, useful and interesting, that's the right way to use AI for a tool like YouTube. And we've been talking ad infinitum about this idea of Google and Apple and others having a distribution advantage. We're often talking about their AI chatbot, right? Their personal assistant style Gen AI tool. But this is yet another example, one of many, many examples where it's not just, am I going to go to Gemini to have a chat? It's, I'm using AI throughout the system, throughout the products. In this case, the VO3 AI. And they have a massive distribution advantage there because they are the distribution point as well as the creator and server of these AI models. So It's very, very powerful.
And to me, this also reinforces something that I've said before about Google, but it keeps coming back to me, which is that Google is fairly bad at tactics and very good at strategy. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you look at Google's moves on a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month time horizon and all of their missteps and all of the stupid shit that they do, it can be very frustrating. And you're like, these guys are like the Keystone Cops. They cannot shoot straight. And there is a strong element of truth to that. They take a lot of very poorly judged shots on goal. But then you zoom out to years, to decades. And then you look at Google's moves and the way in which they've been laying down these macro pieces in a fairly masterful way. And you see that at a very high level strategy point of view, they are clever. And this is whether it applies to operating systems where you've got Android and Chrome, or if you look at Google Maps and the ways in which that means that Google owns all the local data in the world. Or if you now look at YouTube, right? Google acquired YouTube back in 2008, I believe it was. And in a lot of ways, they've moved fairly slowly with it, despite all of its success. And also, if you look at some of YouTube's things that they've done, they haven't been that successful straight away. YouTube Music, right, has been one of those stories of things like start again, stop again, doesn't quite make sense, doesn't quite work. It's like, is Google really paying attention? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But now it's starting to come together. You've got all of these things. You've got the world's greatest creator platform. You have got more eyeballs, more ears than ever paying attention to this thing. You have deepened creator tools. You have companies like Spotify that are frankly struggling a little bit, I think, to articulate and execute on a clear strategy. And suddenly it all makes sense, right? You're like, oh, okay, so YouTube Music is going to be the preferred place for creators because they can have a relationship, a direct relationship with their fans. And YouTube is good at that. Similarly for podcasting, YouTube is still not a great place to be a podcaster, I'll be honest, Chris, but we cannot ignore it. And we know, I think, if we're still doing this, and I hope we are in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, YouTube will be our number one platform where people consume our content. And so Google, they are patient. They make stupid judgments, but they have the right overall view and they don't give up. They just keep going and they keep going till they get it right. And YouTube, to me, are really getting it right now. They are credibly, like I said, they are credibly competing and often beating with Netflix, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify. It's quite amazing, right? And nobody else could really do that. It's something to watch.
You mentioned that they're clever and their strategy is amazing. I wonder how much of it though is strategy and how much of it is that they're willing to just make bets and see what happens. If you think about Apple versus Google, Apple is very deliberative. They're very curated. You might argue that they're kind of fascist in their approach, right? They think that central planning and taste and judgment will win the day. And in many cases, and historically, more recently, that's been proven true. Google, on the other hand, is sort of more analogous to the US and democracy and free markets, especially Alphabet, right? It's much more like a free market where they allow a lot of fat flowers to bloom, and some of them start to look really, really good, and they start to fertilize and curate those and make them part of some sort of strategic landscape. Now, of course, this only works if you have a lot of money coming out of the walls, and you can make all of these bets and you can allow a lot of the flowers to be, duds. If you're a startup founder or an operator in any company other than Google listening to our voices, it's probably not a strategy that's going to work for you very, very well.
Look, I mostly agree with you, Chris, but here's the thing is I don't think they're just trying a bunch of stuff and doubling down on the things that work. I think the reason I'm pointing to strategy is because I believe there is an overarching way of thinking here that Google has seen for a long time, for example, the value of AI. So they keep doing work on AI. And some of their product attempts are quite ham-fisted, but nonetheless, they are now one of the leaders in AI, and you would not want to count them out. Similarly, they have had a music streaming service for, I think, nigh on a decade now. Even before YouTube Music, there was something called Google Play Music, which probably nobody remembers because it was such a flop. But they took the bet, and they lost the bet. Did they give up? No, they did it again and again and again until they started winning. So to me, it's like they are willing to take multiple bets on the same thing because they see strategically the importance of it. And they see that if they execute on it often enough, perhaps they can overcome their own operational executional limitations and get really good at it. You could say the same, for example, of cloud, Chris. Just another example. Google Cloud. Google were absolutely flat-footed when AWS came out. And the first version, second version, third version of Google Cloud was crap and nobody used it. But now, well, they're still not the industry leader, but they are a very, very credible player and a very large player in the cloud space. And that's because Google didn't give up when a lot of times it could have been very easy to justify giving up.
Absolutely. And you mentioned podcasts earlier. YouTube is becoming increasingly amazing for podcasts. You mentioned that they help you create a relationship with your audience. Yeah, it's much more a social network than people understand, and I think that's the strategic vector they need to pursue further. You mentioned that they're great with sort of revenue payouts for creators, and that's absolutely true. They've added direct payments, subscriptions, inline merch, and products, which is awesome.
We should get on that, man.
We should get on that. Yes, I just got the bill from Shopify last night. But the thing that is most impactful for us is the algorithmic discovery, right? So if you're on Spotify, you're on Apple Music or Apple's podcasts, they're not helping you grow your audience in any meaningful way. So the main reason we're on YouTube, Yaniv, I think, is just to try to drive more discovery of the show. It actually works against us in the short term because people look at the YouTube subscriber numbers and view counts, and they're like, oh, your show is really small. And we have to keep reminding people, actually, no, it's massive on podcatchers. YouTube is just, a new platform for us. But, we've actually had guests or bookers say, oh, well, your show is very small. We're like, no, you're looking at the wrong numbers. But we want to be on YouTube, even though the costs us a lot more money to produce video. It's sort of the signaling is not very good because of the weak numbers on the platform right now. But it's the algorithm that we want to drive, and we want to be in the shorts and the reels and all that sort of stuff. So very, very powerful.
So what do you think? Do you agree with us that YouTube is immensely powerful? I'm betting that in 10 years, Spotify and TikTok will be roadkill under YouTube's juggernaut. Do you agree with me? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Okay, now we were just talking about cloud. And Chris, here's a story that I really didn't think we'd be talking about in 2025, or a company I really didn't think we would be talking about in 2025. Oracle, that enterprise, stodgy, boring player, purveyor of very large, difficult to use database software that no one likes to touch. Oracle, those folks, they are in the news. And the reason for that is that their stock has gone crazy. Oracle stock is one of the best performing stocks in the market. They are up 100%. It has doubled in the last 6 months. Oracle founder Larry Ellison has overtaken Elon Musk to be the world's richest man. What is going on with this company? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. A couple of things. The biggest story is one of AI and cloud. Oracle have leaned very heavily into being an AI infrastructure provider, and they're doing it well, right? So Oracle Cloud was never that successful when it was just vanilla cloud. But now that AI has come along, they are minting a lot of money. The latest surge in the stock price, nearly 30% just this week, was because OpenAI have signed a $100 billion contract, again, billion with a B, I have to keep saying this stuff, to procure infrastructure from Oracle over the coming years. So that is a huge stream of revenue from Oracle. Now, why are companies like OpenAI going to Oracle instead of Microsoft, instead of Google, instead of Amazon? One of the reasons, Chris, and this is worth discussing, is they are the only truly neutral horse in this race. All Oracle want to do is put shitloads of NVIDIA chips into data centers and sell that capacity. They're not building their own AI models. They don't have ChatGPT. They don't have Gemini. They are simply a purveyor of infrastructure. And so for a lot of companies like OpenAI, which has a weird but increasingly strained relationship with Microsoft that competes with Google, they would want to have an infrastructure provider that is completely unconflicted and only wants them to succeed. And so that's just been a really smart play by Oracle. Now, the other thing that's happened even more recently is that Oracle is basically the consortium lead for Donald Trump's strange deal to nationalize TikTok and make it an American company. So this is an old ongoing story. Breaking news as we record today is that a deal has been announced. This is a Donald Trump deal, so we don't know what exactly is going to happen. And Oracle is in the lead. So again, they are at the center of politics. They are at the center of AI. And you'd have to say there's just some really great leadership. And it's a very interesting and, like I said, an unexpected king in 2025.
Yeah, so this tells me a few things, a few lessons for operators listening to us. The phrase we've repeated on pretty much every Reacts episode for the last 2 years. New platforms reshuffle the deck on winners and losers. Oracle was the loser of the last cycle. AI has come out and they are emerging as one of the major winners of the new cycle. Very, very powerful thing. The second thing is the power of neutrality, right? The power of pure play, focused execution. If you're trying to do all the things, then there are many, many disadvantages to doing that. One of them is that you're seen as a competitor to many things, and those companies may not want to partner with you because of conflicts of interest, channel conflicts, and so on, which is decidedly the opposite of the Google strategy we just talked about in the previous segment, right? There is more than one way to win, and so you need to pick your way, and you need to execute hard and fast, and the timing is everything, and so that's also interesting to me as well. To be honest, I haven't dug into Oracle's new tech stack, new offering, new value props, new positioning, except to see, Larry hanging out with Trump and some of these announcements and so on. Completely sort of apropos of very little to do with Oracle. His son, David Ellison, is it David? Yeah. His son, David Ellison, is running kind of a completely different part of the family dynasty here. He's running the media and entertainment business. That he built Skydance with a few others, and he's just acquired Paramount and looking to buy Warner Brothers. So while Larry is building the tech empire, David's building the media empire. So the Ellison family are becoming extremely powerful, extremely powerful.
It's not entirely unrelated, I think you could argue. So Scott Galloway on his podcast, so I'm a fan of, he noted that the increase in Larry Ellison's net worth just last week when this stock price increase was enough to buy 15 Paramounts. So it just sort of shows the ascendancy of tech and the power of technology. The waning influence of traditional media, that tech can just sort of run over this stuff. So just, I think David Ellison is quite accomplished in his own right, but clearly Daddy having that much money makes it very easy to roll up media players and become very powerful in that space.
Yeah, that's right. And so you can very quickly see, they can start to piece together, if Google has the tech and the infrastructure and the media through YouTube, Apple has the tech, the infrastructure, the consumer, and the media through Apple TV Plus and Apple Music and podcasts. Facebook is trying to do similar stuff, although their media, their pure play kind of entertainment media stuff is much weaker. You can see, certainly Amazon has media, right? And Amazon Fire TV and Prime Video and all this other stuff. So you can see Oracle very quickly becoming one of the major tech players, if not sort of as one conglomerate, at least the kind of the Oracle Ellison family. And you can see them piecing these things together. So don't sleep on the David Ellison side of the equation as well. And this can become a very interesting powerhouse beyond AI infrastructure.
That's right. But I think we can call it, Microsoft was the tech comeback story of the 2010s, and Oracle is the tech comeback story of the 2020s. These old dinosaurs roaring back to life. It's fascinating to see.
All right, those are our thoughts on Oracle and the Ellison family. What do you guys think? Might they use all their newfound resources and success to become the next Murdochs? Or is this just going to be a blip on the radar? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, the next topic we wanted to talk about was an interview between Tucker Carlson and Sam Altman. Now, we didn't want to spend any time talking about Tucker Carlson and whether you like him, hate him. And so let's not talk about Tucker Carlson, but let's talk about the interview. The interview I thought was really, really interesting because Tucker was asking him questions that it seems that nobody else has asked him, but worse, it seemed that there were questions that he himself had not asked himself, Sam Altman. These were existential questions that seemed to be surprising to Sam, and he seemed to be making up the answers on the fly, and they were answers that really sort of mattered to the long-term place of AI in culture. He asked him about, using suicide as a case study. Sort of came out and straight up asked him, is ChatGPT for or against suicide? And, he started to answer about, well, maybe, when people are very ill and if they're adults and so Tucker says, okay, so it is for suicide. He's like, well, we don't want kids to be, having suicide. And some countries ban suicide. And so maybe what we want to do is whatever. And suicide under these conditions. The point though was not his answer about suicide. It was to me, what struck me was the way that he seemed to be making it up on the fly. It was sort of a lot of maybe we might want to do X and perhaps we might want to apply principle Y. And Tucker, in his typical sort of sarcastic and Columbo way, was sort of saying, I don't understand. Are you for suicide or against suicide? What is the principle here? What struck me is what he said. He sort of accused him of being sort of unburdened by the weight of these moral questions. And I really agree with that assessment. He was sort of asking him things as case studies, and Sam was sort of engaging with each individual case study in a way that seemed to suggest he was making it up on the fly. But more to the point, he seemed to not really be connecting with the fact that these were case studies in a much broader existential kind of framework that he is actually right in the center of. And he seemed to just be a little bit oblivious to that or not wanting to engage with that. And then finally, again, whatever you believe about this and Tucker's conspiracy theories, he basically came out and straight up accused him of murdering the whistleblower, the OpenAI whistleblower, to his face. I mean, he didn't not mince words. Sam Altman essentially said, "Oh, wow, I've never been accused of murder in an interview before," which, again, I think some people think that case is put to bed. Some people think that case is extremely suspicious, and Tucker certainly believes it to be, on the face of it, murder. But the fact of bringing it up to Sam Altman in a one-on-one interview was a fascinating sight to see. And so, yeah, I just thought the whole thing was just one of. I've seen a lot of interviews with Sam Altman, and they all go basically the same way, and he says basically the same things. This is the first time I've seen Sam Altman stressed, under pressure, and I thought answering from a place of ill-preparedness and a lack of engagement with the gravity of the issues that he's actually dealing with. So I thought that was a really interesting conversation.
It is interesting, Chris. I wouldn't say it's entirely surprising. So if we cast our minds back to last year, the big story or at least the big scandal in AI was Sam Altman's temporary ouster from OpenAI as CEO. If you remember, he was temporarily rolled by the board. And a lot of the reasoning for that, as understood, is that he wasn't taking AI safety seriously. Look, if you look at Sam's background as a founder, as the leader of YC, he comes from the operator, executor, move fast and break things world of startups. He wants to get shit done. He is not, in my view, a great philosopher or an ethicist or a deep thinker. And I think the AI safety people, who he's somewhat deplatformed within the company, he removed some of their power. They were the ethicists and the philosophers of this, and he found them tiresome. And he just wanted to build the best AI model. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, he's very slick. He does a good line in seeming thoughtful and reasonable. And I'd say overall he is thoughtful and reasonable, but he is not probably the person who would want to be the ethical custodian of a technology as potentially powerful as AI. And so, yeah, if you scratch below the surface, these are not the questions he's interested in. He's interested in how do we train the next great model and reach AGI and stuff like that. He's not interested in these nuances and road bumps that slow things down. And so, yeah, it's a bit unnerving. I don't think Sam Altman is the king that I want. So yeah, it's an interesting time.
Well, I mean, he's not the king. Maybe he's not the king you want. I would certainly prefer him than Elon Musk. What struck me though is just how ill-prepared and ineffective he was in that particular interview. Look, maybe he was having an off day or something. He started to touch on what I would expect to be the right answer. Even if you're a technologist and you're move fast and break things, and you're not the ethicist and the philosopher, you would have thought he would have had enough conversations with those people internally to have some mental model and to be able to point Tucker and others to that mental model. And he started to do that by saying, we have the AI spec, and it's the way we document our thoughts and how the model is supposed to behave. But he would then allow himself to get pulled off track. And what I would have said to Tucker is, listen, Tucker, I am not the best philosopher and ethicist in the company, and I have a whole team of people who are incredible at this. So it's not about one person making all these decisions. We have documented our philosophical and moral frameworks and our technical specs, and it's here in public. And we encourage everybody to engage with it, discuss it, debate it, and to see our work in public. And And I would have sort of put an end to the conversation, at least by pointing him to a process, a people, a committee, a framework, rather than sort of making up the answers on the fly and then appear to be making up the answers on the fly. And I think that's what really hurt him in the whole conversation.
Yeah, look, I agree. And then you've also pointed he's, I assume, in somewhat as a follow-up to that interview, he wrote a little article called Teen Safety, Freedom and Privacy, which to me doesn't do a whole lot better. But Chris, did you want to summarize what he's talking about here?
Yeah, it does seem almost like it was in response to the interview that didn't go very well. I don't know I didn't follow along the blowback from that interview, if any. But sort of a few days later, there was an OpenAI announcement, as you said, called Teen Safety, Freedom and Privacy. And so let me break down some of the headlines, takeaways from this. Under the topic of privacy, they essentially summarized that AI conversations are considered highly personal and sensitive, comparable to doctor-patient and lawyer-client privilege. OpenAI advocates for legal protections for AI conversations. He's been saying that actually for a number of days and weeks. And so they've announced advanced security features to protect data even from employees. And of course, they've talked about exceptions existing for serious misuse, imminent threats to life, harm, and others, and large-scale risks like cybersecurity. Then on the topic of freedom, they've sort of had this principle of adults should be able to use AI tools broadly within safe limits, which means things like default restrictions around sexuality and so on. But they want to make it so that adults can request for different behavior, for more flirtatious or more information about suicide, and so for cases of like fiction or research. And so the guiding principle is treat adults like adults. And again, he sort of touched on this in the Tucker Carlson interview, but it was a little bit of bumbling. On the topic of teen protection, they touched on the idea that teen safety is prioritized over privacy and freedom. They have age protection systems which will separate under 18s from adults, in certain use cases where where that's relevant. In some countries, they're going to demand or require ID to acknowledge the privacy, to sort of make that privacy trade-off and that security trade-off. And teens will have stricter limits, no flirtation, no suicide discussions, even in creative settings. And if teens show suicidal ideation, parents or authorities may be contacted and new parental controls will be built in. So yeah, it really does feel like they're hitting all of the key points that Tucker Carlson hit. And they're sort of trying to clean up that conversation with a more formal policy and announcement and sort of directional principles.
Kind of, yeah. So the interesting thing here is, Chris, that like in a sense, there's nothing super new. These are all issues that a company like Google had to deal with when they were building a search engine, right? And, it's funny, back in my early time there, the team in the office next to me was called, not very euphemistically, the porn team, right? And the job of the porn team was pretty much this. It was to make sure that if you weren't searching for porn, that you did not get any porn in your results. But if you were searching for porn, you got lots of porn in your results, right? And so the idea there, of course, being that it is sort of a version of that treat adults like adults. You want to make sure that you're not like pushing things at people that might make them uncomfortable. But if those are the things they're very explicitly looking for, then up to a point, they will get them. Not hate speech, not suicidal ideation, and so on. But like overall, treat adults like adults. And then the second thing that Sam is hinting at here is a more recent debate that we've actually covered on this podcast as well, which is around teenagers, right? Teenagers on social media, teenagers with smartphones, and what do we owe them, and how should they have a different experience from adults, because they are not adults. And, there are countries intervening in this. There is new legislation being passed in certain places. The big tech companies are, in my view, belatedly waking up to their responsibility there and trying to self-regulate, partly in order to avoid that heavier hand of government regulation. And so a lot of this is just ChatGPT or OpenAI playing catch up. But I do think that let adults be adults is an incredibly glib statement that, again, betrays a lack of depth in thinking, right? And I think it's also here there's a critical difference with a search engine, which is all a search engine can do is direct you to information that was created by third parties. Whereas ChatGPT, it is generating new context for you in response to the conversation that you are having. And so I think just to say, let adults be adults, when ChatGPT, when asked for an opinion on something, right, to the point about suicide, it will give you an opinion. So what opinion should it have? What is its moral and ethical framework? Google doesn't really need a moral and ethical framework in quite the same way as ChatGPT does. So what's it going to be? And a glib little statement like that doesn't make me feel like OpenAI and those GPT language models are in particularly safe hands.
I mostly agree with you. I do think that Google has pulled one of the great kind of branding tricks of all time. They're perceived to be this honest broker with sort of an unfiltered view of the world. And, you get what you ask for, and, oh, we don't have any opinions and we don't impose our view on the world. You can trust us. I think Google hasn't been, 10 raw blue links for a long time. They've synthesized and summarized data for a long time. And even before that, they make a lot of decisions about ranking, what they will include, what they won't include. I think one of the greatest tricks Google ever pulled was to convince the world that they are an opinion-free, honest broker. There is a lot of subtle opinions and influence underneath the hood. Now, as you say, though, and this is where I agree with you, it's even more weaponized, more powerful in the hands of a ChatGPT, where everything is synthesized, and there is an awful lot of nuance and subtlety in the language that the model can use and how it answers questions. So, of course, the problem is magnified. I did not finish the last part of that post, though. That they're basically, at the end, they're acknowledging that these principles are often at tension or at conflict with each other, and there's a balancing act to make. And then finally, he did what I said he should have done with Tucker Carlson, which is they said that these decisions are being based on consultation with experts with the goal of transparency about trade-offs. So, look, this is really hard. I think anybody in OpenAI's position will struggle with this. I think Sam is struggling with this. I think what struck me about the interview is how little he seemed to have reckoned with it. And he seemed, Tucker Carlson accused him of being unburdened by the problem. And I think that's partly true, partly it's affect and style. Sam Altman is a fairly monotone person. But one example of this, actually, he said to him, he said, do you seem unburdened by this? Does any of this keep you up at night? He's like, oh yeah, I sleep very, very poorly thinking about all these things. He's like, okay, well, what are you thinking about when you're up at night and can't sleep? And he's like, oh, the stuff we've been talking about already. And then he said, okay, well, what have you thought about in relation to, I think he talked about suicide or some other thing. And then Sam literally then said, well, I'm sort of making up an answer on the fly here, but maybe the principle should be this and maybe the principle should be that. And it's like, well, which is it, Sam? Do you stay up at night thinking about this, or are you making up the answer on the fly? Like, it seemed disingenuous. So I think part of it you have to discount, which is he has a monotone sort of thoughtful affect. And so he doesn't seem fully burdened by anything ever. But part of it is actually the substance of his answers, which seemed like he had not been burdened by it at all, even intellectually. And so those two things, I think, struck me as I was watching the interview.
I mean, I feel like someone like Tucker Carlson should be looking at all the things that should be keeping him up at night rather than questioning others, but that is a different podcast.
That is a topic for another day.
So those are our thoughts on Sam Altman and OpenAI's position on ethics. What do you think? Is Sam Altman the sort of person you want deciding the ethical future of the world, or would you like somebody with a different perspective? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. All the best .coms are taken or crazily overpriced, so you settle on a workaround domain for your website. Don't compromise. Get a clean, sharp .tech domain that instantly says, this is a tech startup. Grab yours at get.tech/TSP for the Startup Podcast or via domain registrars like GoDaddy.
On to our next topic. Figma announced some new AI features, I think just last night as of time of recording. The headline for me, I didn't have a chance to read the whole article, watch any videos, except to see just an animation of someone clicking inside a collection or a frame, and there was a little prompt window there, a little prompt text box, and you could say, like, make this dark mode, or rearrange this carousel so that it's, like this, or rearrange the elements to emphasize more of this. And it would literally, like, magically refactor the part of the interface you selected using best practices and incredible design and layouts, just basically regenerate part of your interface, whether the whole frame or parts of the frame. I have not had a chance to play with this, but it looked freaking awesome. Now, I just want to be very quick to point out, a lot of these AI tools, guys, like, when you go actually play with them, I just played recently with HeyGen Agent, which is, HeyGen is this thing that lets you make AI videos, and HeyGen Agent is intended to, like, you just give it a few words and it generates the entire thing for you, and B-roll and edits and everything. I played with it and it just produced junk. It produced junk. And so, we're going to have to play with the Figma thing. I suspect, Yuki, our friend over there, who's the head of product, has put a lot more thought and care into the craftsmanship of this particular feature than HeyGen has. But, it's often, these things have real uncanny valley problems. So we're going to have to test it and see. But the ambition of it and the trend line of it, the kind of the arc of history here is continues to be very interesting.
I mean, if I were being unkind, Chris, I'd actually say about bloody time that Figma released something like this. It actually feels like they've moved a little bit slowly, but hopefully, to your point, Yuki held a high bar for quality, and that's why it took them so long. But I think something like this should work well, and I base that assessment on my increasing amount of experience using AI coding tools such as Claude Code. And here's the interesting thing, and we've kind of touched on this before, but the subtlety, the nuance is important here, right? In order to be able to use something like Claude Code effectively, and it can be incredibly powerful, it really can, you need to understand enough about how that software is built and the libraries that you're using and the frameworks that you're using to actually give it good instructions to say, this is what I want you to do. And then when it comes back with a result, you know if it's good or not because you have enough of that domain expertise and taste and judgment as an engineer to know whether it's produced good code or not. And I actually think the analogy with design is pretty strong. Right? Because I actually think software engineering and product design, they're both at some deep level design disciplines. I believe that good software engineers, they are primarily designers of software, and then they use code to implement their designs, right? And so in the same way, I think a good designer has a concept of how something should look, how it should work. I don't think that the key competence of a good designer needs to be pushing pixels around or perfecting gradients and doing that sort of stuff. It is having that higher level function. And so a good designer will be able to use Figma AI or a tool like that to take away a lot of that busy work and focus on what they are truly talented at, which is interaction design and visual design. I also think that a person who is not very good at design will not be able to use this tool to do vibe design, right? In the same way that vibe coding ultimately ends in tears, I think vibe design will end in tears. AI turns out to be more, to use the old Steve Jobs expression, Chris, it's more of a bicycle for the mind, right? Rather than a tool that allows you to outsource your thinking, which I think was the hope of some folks, right? If you know what you are doing, AI will make you faster at doing that thing. If you don't know what you are doing, AI will make you faster at doing bad stuff, at just nonsense. And so, that's kind of my take on this. I would really expect it to work. I would also expect it to work only particularly well in the hands of professionals. So it's not going to take designers' jobs away.
Yes, look, I think the time they've taken to ship this is exactly right. I think Yuki is taking the Apple approach, and I know Yuki personally, and I know he is more Apple than random startup guy. I think he like Apple, they have the distribution, they have the user base, they have the brand equity. They should be and are not in any rush to ship half-baked crap. And even this thing that they're releasing, they're calling it alpha, early alpha preview, right? They're saying this is not ready, and anything it does, expect it to break. And so I think they're doing it exactly the right way. They're known for craftsmanship, and they're also doing it the right way in the sense that they're helping you. They're kind of moving up the stack with AI. So they're helping you generate certain assets with AI. They're doing a lot of autocomplete with AI. And now they're helping you refactor parts of the interface with AI. They're not sort of jumping to the end state where they're like, give us some vibe prompt and we'll generate an entire app for you. They're keeping the craftspeople in the loop, and they're working through each layer of abstraction so that they get each piece of it really, really right. I think it's fucking brilliant. And you mentioned vibe coding. I have finally found a vibe coding tool that actually works. To create, for a non-engineer like myself, that can actually create an application with authentication, with image upload, with actual database manipulation, without screwing around with third-party tools and database providers and crap. It just blew my mind. It actually made the app I've been trying to make for a year. And when I say I've been trying to make it for a year, I've been like each new vibe coding tool, I've sort of given it a PRD and seen what it can do and then tinkered with it for a minute and to see if it gets anywhere. And they all get stuck on Superbase and they all get stuck on other bullshit. The only one that did it and did it fast was a company called Solid, trysolid.com. It's a Y Combinator thing, I think. They just announced, that they just came out recently. Yaniv, I gave this thing a PRD and it built the app. And I asked it to do some changes for me. It made the changes. There were a couple of tiny little niggles here and there. But the real stuff, the hard stuff, login, session management, image upload, it actually worked without me having to go futz around with Superbase or some other nonsense. So I want to put a plug in for those guys, and well done.
Okay, well, I will take a look, but yeah, I can believe that it is an improvement. I still think that in order to produce production grade applications that are more than a toy problem, I still think you need developers in the mix. And I think to produce beautiful designs that actually are truly functional, you still need a designer in the mix.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying these other vibe tools have promised something that they didn't deliver, and this thing is much closer to that promise. Yeah, you still need product craft, you still need design, you still need engineering. You can't outsource that stuff. It really takes a lot. All right, those are our thoughts on vibe design and vibe coding. What do you guys think? Have you been using the latest tools? Are they working for you? And is AI going to disrupt design and engineering, or is it going to be a critical tool for the next generation of software? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. On to our next and final topic. We wanted to talk about Nothing. The company Nothing, not discussing no topic at all. It's not a very big company, but it is popular amongst the aficionados, those that are in the know. There is a mobile phone company, a company that generates handsets, right? Cell phones, called Nothing Phone. They have the phone, they have headphones, earpods, they have a few other bits and pieces, and they're a small shop. They only produce low volumes, but they create, interesting designs. There's sort of transparencies. There's these kind of glyphs on the backs of the devices. They look pretty cool and technical. And the CEO and the team are very kind of social media literate. They're on social media. They review the iPhone, for example. They compare the iPhone to their phones. They talk about what's likely happening behind the scenes. They talk about their struggles in terms of supply chain and trying to compete with Apple at volume. So they have this really great kind of grassroots DIY culture or full kind of build in public culture. And they build phones and devices that look very different because of the transparency and translucence and technical kind of design language. And some of it's also retro. They have these full over-ear headphones that are quite retro. I think they're really well positioned to do some cool, if not niche things, at least historically. But now they've just announced they've raised $200 million explicitly to go down the route of building AI-first devices. And, we've talked about the advantages Apple and Google have, and of course they'll probably continue to have. But I do think a company like Nothing with a smaller install base, smaller legacy partners, app developers, and cognitive inertia to deal with, maybe more nimbleness and agility, and yet they still have kind of real supply chain, real design chops, industrial design and software design chops, and a real production line with real distribution, albeit smaller, and real customer support. I think they're in a very, very strong position to produce high quality AI first devices that something like the Humane Pin, would have loved to have created, and to do that in a very considered way, in a way that maybe is a little more agile than Apple or Google may be allowed to do, given, their big co bloat and some of their, innovators' dilemma that's probably in the mix. I don't know if you know about Nothing or if you've seen this announcement about their fundraising.
I'm familiar with Nothing, and, I think they make a really nice device, but I'll take the other side of this one, just on structural points of view. I think this is unlikely to be successful in the same way that the Humane Pin and the Friend dongle and the Rabbit device are unlikely to be successful. And I think there are two reasons for that, Chris. One is that building an AI product is very, very expensive. And yes, $200 million is a lot of money. But if you look at the amounts of money being raised and spent in AI right now, $200 million looks like a pretty small raise. And so I'd be skeptical about that. But I actually have an even bigger reason to doubt this, which is that nothing is a hardware company. And hardware and software are very different disciplines. And it's actually very hard for a hardware company to do software well and vice versa, right? There's a reason why Garmin smartwatches are restricted only to running freaks. It's because their software is terrible. They make the best hardware. They've been making hardware for decades, right? And so when it came to a smartwatch that had the best GPS and the best tracking features, Garmin was it. But their software was really bad, right? And there are only a few companies that are good at both. And even in those cases, it took them decades and also billions of dollars to get there. Apple is good at hardware and software. You could argue that Google, finally, again, after decades of work, are good at hardware and software. They can make both a phone and a phone operating system that are both good. To get good at both is really hard. And I just don't see a hardware company like Nothing taking on one of the most complex domains in software, which is AI, and coming up with a good result with what is, although a huge amount of money in this context, is fairly limited resources.
So let me partially agree with you and partially disagree with you. I think $200 million is a vanishingly small amount of money for a hardware company trying to take on the AI behemoths. I agree with you on that. You have to recognize, though, that they have revenue, they have customers, they have, I think they do, online campaigns, and, they've been funding themselves in other ways. I'm not familiar with their balance sheet, but the 200 million number is very, very small. I agree with you fully on that. Where I disagree with you is that they're not a software company and that they will not be able to win because they're not a software company. They are actually quite good at building skins and front ends and sort of packaging new kinds of software. They have the Nothing OS, which is actually a really elegant skin on top of Android with no bloat, no crap. They built the kind of the unified messaging hack on top of iMessage, which sort of was shortly superseded by RCS and so on. And they've done a really elegant job of taking other people's software stacks and making it bespoke and interesting and different for them. And I think if they were to take OpenAI or Gemini or something else and package that and tightly integrate that with their hardware, I think they will do a perfectly reasonable and if not excellent job of that. But do they have the war chest? Do they have the runway? Do they have the distribution, the supply chain, economies of scale, the staying power to win this game? No, I don't think that's a slam dunk. Could they be a serious contender for, a Microsoft or an Oracle or an Amazon to buy them to jumpstart their journey into the consumer hardware space or the re-entry into the consumer hardware space, or a Facebook? Maybe. I think they could be a serious Switzerland competitor, which would be the basis on top of which one of the other also rans in the consumer hardware space to bootstrap their AI hardware journey.
Look, I hope you're right, Chris. I really do, because I think there needs to be more innovation and more competition in the AI space. I don't think we benefit if only these hyperscale trillion-dollar companies can compete. I'm still skeptical, but I would love to be wrong, and I would love for you to be right on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the skeptical is fully justified, right? So I wouldn't bet a lot of money on them, but I'm enthusiastic about them. I like them. I like their philosophy. I like their execution. Yeah. I like their ambition, and I like their chances way more than I like, Humane Pin or whatever. These guys know how to build practical hardware, and they know how to build polished software, actually polished repackaged software, and I think that they've got a good kind of marketing kind of skill, muscle, and just very pragmatic and thoughtful guys. So I'm cheering them on.
Yeah, man, they're the liquid death of phones. I love them. Okay, those are our thoughts on the Nothing phone. Do you think a relatively small player can take on Google and Apple and Samsung and actually make a better portable AI device? Is Nothing the company to do it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
All right. Well, I think that's it for today's show. As always, thanks for joining us, guys. Yaniv, how can people find you on the internet?
I am on LinkedIn, trying to make it a less boring place. I love getting connection requests from TSP listeners. So give me a request, tell me that you come from the show, and I will happily accept it. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, that's right. You can follow me on all the social media at Chris Saad or on LinkedIn as well. Join us in the comments on all of the various social media platforms. I will be down there chatting away as well. And otherwise, be sure to subscribe, follow us, tell your friends about us. It's the way we grow the show and help more people like you. All right. Catch you next one. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good one. Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by .tech domains. Naming your startup should be easy, but it isn't because all the good .com names are taken or wildly overpriced. No more. You don't have to compromise. Your domain shows your focus and intent, so make it sharp, clean, and unmistakably tech with a .tech domain. How do you do that? Head to www.get.tech/TSP or a registrar like GoDaddy and grab your .tech domain today. Get.tech/TSP for the Startup Podcast so they know you came from us.